stages which we reach in our development and which impact on our way of judging whether and why something is morally good or bad. Kohlberg develops an alternative cognitive model and similarly assumes that it develops in stages, but these stages are much longer ones, so that the person achieves the last stage at 30 or more. Kohlberg differentiates between three major levels: the preconventional level, the conventional, and post-conventional principled level, each of which consists of 2 stages, so that there are 6 stages of moral development altogether. Most adults are to be found at the conventional level of ethical reasoning. Some of them remain on the preconventional or step up to the post-conventional, but it is, according to his interview-based research, not so probable that somebody, let's say 20 or 25 years old, will reach the 3rd post-conventional level. On which level are you? This depends on how you make your moral decisions. We can compare it to the ripples on the pond, which are made by the stone thrown into it. Putting it simply, it is a question of whether you consider only your own interests or your own values norms, preconventional, or also those of a larger group of people, conventional, or of all humanity, post-conventional. Kohlberg, to discover at which stage of moral development people are, used the dilemma story of Heinz, a pharmacist. Heinz has a wife who is dying and needs a particular medicine. The pharmacist requires a huge sum for it, which Heinz can't afford. The pharmacist will neither reduce the price nor accept being paid in installments. The question is not only what Heinz should do, should not do, but why. Kohlberg is interested more in the moral reasoning of the person being interviewed than in a result. It is this which provides information on which stage of moral development a person is. The instrument used for measuring this is called Kohlberg's moral judgment interview and requires trained interviewers and scholars. At a preconventional level, you are considering only your interest or the interest of other people staying close to you and judge the action by its consequences. Things and persons are treated instrumentally. At the first stage, punishment obedience orientation, you will probably not steal the medicine out of a fear of punishment. At the second stage, your decision will depend on the rewards and possibilities which satisfy your needs or not. So if the wife is useful for you, cook's wife, you will probably take some risk to save her and steal the medicine. In the business context, you are acting ethically for fear of being sanctioned or prosecuted, stage first, or because of the effect of your behavior on your reputation and brand. It assimilates Carl Hohmann's approach to ethics, economic ethics, discussed in Module 4. At the conventional level in the model, you take into account a larger reference group and your behavior conforms to some social rules. Which one depends on your state of moral development. At the third stage, good boy, nice girl orientation, your decision is determined by the social approval which you can get from the decision. Wanting to maintain or win the affection and approval of others by being a good person. Let's say that in your reference group there is no approval of stealing. You won't steal. If there were such approval, you would still avoiding risking social disapproval. At the fourth stage, law and order orientation, your decision will be oriented towards the rules and the laws existing in the society. You will not steal because it is not legal, and this does not depend on the probability of whether you will be or not caught by the police, as at the conventional level. In the business context, at the third stage, the individual or the company behave morally because of the need to adhere to professional industry codes of conduct, and at the fourth stage, the company is motivated to behave ethically because of broad industry standards and ethical norms expectations. At the post-conventional level, your reference group is large and encompasses a society as such, a whole of humanity. At the fifth stage, you are oriented towards the social contract. So it is no longer social pressure or social rules that are directing your behavior, but individual rights which are assumed by different persons. So at the fifth stage, we will think about people who may be excluded from the social order. Individual rights determine behavior whose scope is to improve human purposes. When laws are not consistent with individual rights and the interests of the majority, you have to think about alternatives. In other words, you act according to a social contract you think all society will accept, something like theory of justice of roles. At the sixth stage, you are oriented towards universal ethical principles, and in this stage, freely chosen ethical principles. These principles could be Kant's deontological principles, like respect for the dignity of human being in the spirit of humanism. This kind of reasoning involves also taking the perspective of every person or group that could potentially be affected by the decision. In the business context, the company at this fifth level goes beyond the small circle of interest and behaves ethically because of expectations from the society and the broad group of its members, lobby groups, customers. At the sixth stage, the company behaves independently of what others are thinking, free from time pressure, group pressure, the social impact, and behaves according to the internalized belief of what is morally right. To summarize, Kohlberg creates a situation where one is forced to take a decision which has no clear yes or no, and has to find arguments for one's decision. Based on these arguments, we can position the person at various levels of moral development, starting from pre-conventional and reaching to post-conventional. We can transfer this way of thinking to a business ethical context. Usually, with age, you are able to consider not only your point of view and not only your own social group or country, but are able to enlarge your perspective to consider all of humanity.